brothers and sisters, that we always have on Jumu'ah, part of the significance of the Friday, part of what makes it different and distinct from the other days, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Saturday, Sunday, is that this is the day mentioned by the Prophet ﷺ that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created Adam, sent him down to this earth. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that the Friday is a unique and special day and a gift to this ummah that was not gifted to the other ummah before us. Another unique thing about this Friday, distinct and stand out from the other days, is that it's the one day where it's wajib, at the very least for the men, that all of us come to the masjid. That there's no excuse that, but I have work or I have this. You must come. If you are baligh, aqil, all of the men. And of course the women are invited and welcomed, but it is a must for all of us. Why? Because it's one of those times out of the week that you have to come together, shoulder to shoulder, foot to foot, standing next to and being with and being in the company of your brothers and sisters of faith. And not only this, not only are you coming together to be together with brothers and sisters who share your values, but to have those values and those beliefs and those practices reinforced. Because we go out every single day, work, responsibilities, bills, relationships, and all kinds of other things, and we need to be reminded collectively together with a single message and a common understanding. That is a part and parcel of how you build a community of faith, so that you and I have the same aqidah, the same beliefs, and the same practices. Not that we're a monolith. You're going to have your culture, you're going to have your background, you're going to have your tongue, you're going to have your food, you're going to have, etc. But when it comes to our iman, that we have to be on the same page. This is one of the things that makes Jumu'ah so important, so significant. Not only that, there are certain etiquettes that must be observed in the Friday. You cannot eat and drink during the Jumu'ah. You cannot eat and drink during the Jumu'ah. You cannot use your cell phone during the Jumu'ah. You cannot do this. Is drinking water haram? No, it is not. Is using your cell phone haram? No, it's not. So long as you're not doing something haram. But during the Jumu'ah, you're not supposed to eat. You're not supposed to drink and eat. During the Jumu'ah, at that time, then that's not allowed. Just like in Ramadan, outside of Ramadan, can you drink water, eat oranges, bananas, fruit, baris, hidab, ukhat, whatever? Of course you can. But during Ramadan, during the day, can you do that? No, it's haram. It's a special sacred time. Jumu'ah, special sacred time. Special sacred character, etiquettes, adab that you're supposed to have when you come to this place. Because of, you're here to be reminded, not to quench your thirst. You're here to be reminded, not to do business. You're here to be reminded, not to be like, oh, mashallah, assalamu alaikum, brother, so on and so forth. That's a natural consequence of coming together with other brothers and sisters, alhamdulillah. But the primary reason for the Jumu'ah is to be here to be reminded why you're really here. وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us explicitly why we are here and what our purpose is in this life. It's not soccer, it's not football, it's not your work, it's not your side hustle, it's not your business, it's not even your kids, it's not even your wife or your husband. That's not your purpose in life. All of those things maybe have significance in your life, they may be important to you, they have their role, they have their place, but that's not your purpose. That is not why you exist. All of those things are supposed to be subservient, supportive of you in the reason for existence. And your main goal, which is the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the exaltation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, His veneration, Him being priority over all else. And then how you do that, how that's actualized, how that's manifested, is through following the life and the legacy of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. طيب يقول الله سبحانه وتعالى في محكم التنزيل بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم كل نفس ذائقة الموت وإنما توفون أجوركم يوم القيامة فمن زحزح عن النار وأدخل الجنة فقد فاز وما الحياة الدنيا إلا متاع الغرور. My beloved brothers and sisters, the Prophet ﷺ, he told us in a prophetic tradition, اكثروا من ذكر هادم اللذات. Remember often, remember frequently the destroyer of pleasures. Yani on your mind, that you should be ruminating, thinking about, reflecting on often the destroyer of pleasures. And this is collected in Sunan al-Tirmidhi and also in Sunan Ibn Majah, that the Prophet ﷺ told us that you should remember the destroyer of pleasures. What is the destroyer of pleasures, brothers and sisters? Is death. And why did the Prophet ﷺ call it the destroyer of pleasures? Because when you're having a conversation and a get-together at a coffee shop with friends, or you're at a party or any gathering, nothing will bring that down. Nothing will bring sober people up like you all of a sudden talking about your dead auntie or your cousin who passed away or a friend who you just buried last week or a relative who died of cancer or a child who died from starvation or bombing. Nothing will bring people down and make them somber like remembering death. Because death, ayyuha al-ikhwa al-akhawat, is an inevitable part of life. It is a fact. It is something that none of us can get away from. It doesn't matter if you believe in God or you don't. It doesn't matter if you're a Muslim or not. As I mentioned in this ayah, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, كُلُّ نَفْسٍ ذَلِكَ الْمَوْتِ. Every soul shall taste death. Okay, طيب. It's a sober reality. It's something that all of us will have to experience and go through. Why would the Prophet ﷺ tell us that you just think about that often? Shouldn't I be thinking about other things? Shouldn't I be thinking about surviving? Shouldn't I be thinking about living and thriving? Why think about death? Why think about my own mortality? And part of the reason for this, part of the divine wisdom and the prophetic wisdom is because death has this compelling way of giving you perspective. Death has a way of shaking you up and reminding you of your sober reality that it very well may be I can leave from this minbar and not make it home today. Because remember, when it says remember death often, death could be around the corner for any of us at any moment. It doesn't matter how old you are, how young you are. It doesn't matter male, female. It doesn't matter what job you have or occupation or status, whatever acronym you have in the beginning of your name, doctor, whatever, or at the end of your name. Every single one of us will have to deal with our own mortality. And subhanAllah, when you accept that, when you realize that, and the Prophet ﷺ is telling us you should think about it a lot, because you're constantly reminded about other things outside. The moment you step from out these walls, matter of fact, while you're sitting there, your phone is reminding you about something else. Every last one of us, or for the most part, most of us have a phone in our pocket, or in our purse, or in our whatever, right, in your jacket. And as we speak, I guarantee you some of you are getting notifications right now and reminders about something else. That you got to do something else, that you got to pay for something else, that you haven't been to this website in a while, that you have to pay this bill, that you got to do this, that you got, constantly you're being reminded, let alone when you physically step out those doors, you get back in your car, you go back to work, you go to your family, you go to the soccer game, you go to your, whatever it is that you do, you're constantly being reminded about all kinds of other things. And so, then you need to what? You need to prioritize. Because there's so many things that are coming at you, all of them telling you they're important. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in broad strokes, tell us what our priorities should be. So now I go back to that ayat that I did not translate. كُلُّ نَفْسٍ ذَائِقَةُ الْمَوْتِ, that every soul shall taste death. وَإِنَّمَا تُوَفَّوْنَ أُجُورَكُمْ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ, and every single individual will be paid their wages, will be compensated on the day of judgment, on the day of standing, Yom al-Qiyamah, right? Qiyam meaning to stand up. Yom al-Qiyamah, the day of standing, i.e. when we will all have to stand before our Lord and Creator. And if you did good, you will be compensated as such. And what is the reward of good except more good? And then of course on the other end, for worse, if that was not your lot, that you weren't of the righteous, that you weren't of the believers, then you will be compensated accordingly. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala goes on to say, to give us perspective related to death. فَمَنْ زُحْزِحَ عَنِ النَّارِ, and whoever's feet are saved from slipping into the fire. وَأُدْخِلَ الْجَنَّةِ, and they have entered or been entered and placed into paradise. And when we said they have been entered and placed into paradise, أيها الأخوة والأخوات, because it is not singularly your deeds that will get you and I into paradise, but rather the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that will get you into paradise. But Allah says, whoever is saved from the fire and whoever enters into paradise, فَقَدْ فَازَ. Here Allah is telling us what? When you think about death, كُلُّ نَفْسٍ ذَائِقَةُ الْمَوْتِ, then the perspective that you have is what? What is really successful then in this life? If I look back in my life and I catalog everything that I've done and my accomplishments and my feats and my failures, when all of that is looked up, how do I know if I've been successful in my life or not? If you have been saved from the hellfire and you entered into paradise, then no matter what was happening in this life for you, you are successful. So now that could be a man who's of humble means. He doesn't have a lot of money, but he worshiped Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He raised his family on that, and he lived by that, and then he died on that. فَقَدْ فَازَ. That person is successful. And if a woman, if she was raised like that, lived like that, was a part of a family, and raised her family on that, belief in Allah, following the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, and those values and those priorities, she prioritized that over everything else. But of humble means, nobody knows her name. She's not in the newspaper. She doesn't have a reality TV show, people following her. Nobody knows who she is, except her family and her little circle of influence. That's all they know. But she doesn't have a super big house. She didn't make it up into the suburbs. She didn't make it into a big mansion. But she died believing in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and prioritizing that over everything else. فَقَدْ فَازَ. Then she's successful. If a baby in a village amongst rubble died of starvation, to us in our eyes, we would say that's what? Khasara. This tragedy and oppression. That baby would have had their whole life ahead of them. But the belief of the Muslims, we say that baby is where? Fil Jannah. Fil Jannah. So we say, even though to us it looks like what we're watching on the news or on our feeds, it looks like a loss. But for us, what? Faqad faz. That baby's successful. Matter of fact, more successful than you and me, because we're still here. Which means what? I don't know if I'm going to Jannah. You don't know if you're going to Jannah. But that baby, that's khalas. That's a done deal. More successful than us. Even if someone is a doctor, even if I have a business, even if, play. So now, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala goes on finishing that ayah, وَمَنْ حَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا إِلَّا مَتَاعُ الْغُرُورِ. Again, giving us perspective related to death. And this life is nothing but a temporary pleasure and deception. It's mata'. There is enjoyment here. There is pleasure here. There is things to partake in and indulge in. But it's a deception. It's a ghurur. It's like a mirage. You're out in the desert. You think you've made it to an oasis. You think you've made it to some water. But that's not it. That's not the reality. And so death has a way of giving us perspective. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not leave us for our own devices, brothers and sisters. In this one ayah, He's given us the perspective that we're supposed to have. What is true and ultimate success. And then the Prophet ﷺ, in another hadith, he brings it in and hones that perspective and that perception even further and makes it even sharper. The Prophet ﷺ, he mentions in a hadith in Sahih Muslim, قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يتبع الميت ثلاثة فيرجع اثنان ويبقى معه واحد يتبعه أهله وماله وعمله فيرجع أهله وماله ويبقى عمله. The Prophet ﷺ, again, speaking on death, he said that when a person dies, of course we all know, they're going to collect that body as quickly as possible. They're going to get it to the brother here locally in Minnesota, the brother Abdullah, or Sheikh Abdullah. If any of you know him or are familiar with him, if you don't, eventually you will. But he will be responsible. He's going to wash your body, prepare it, get a coffin, and then whichever respective masjid your family wants to take you to pray the janazah. And then, of course, at that point, once they've prayed the janazah for you, what happens? Now they get ready. Everybody, mashallah, jostling and pushing because they want to carry the body. They want to get the ajr of that. Min huquq al-muslimin, from the rights of the Muslim, that you help facilitate their janazah. They put it in the hearse. It's driven down, driven to the graveyard. And the Prophet ﷺ, starting from there, starting right after that janazah, the Prophet ﷺ said, who's going to be following that janazah until it reaches the graveyard? And until that body is placed in the grave, he said there are three who follow that person. There are three who follow them. He said the first one that will follow you is ahluhu, your family. Your family will follow you. Your wife, your children, your husbands, your cousins, their eyes welling up with tears in that somber mood, hopefully remembering good of you, hopefully saying good things about you, hopefully feeling a gap and a hole in their hearts what you used to fill with your presence. Hopefully. But even if they don't have positive things to say, either way they follow your family. Then the second one he said is your wealth. And your wealth, whether that is, right, in ancient times, whether it was servants or slaves, or whether it was the wealth that everybody's waiting to distribute now that you're gone. And then, of course, your actions and your deeds. He said these three things, they follow you. Two of them return. I mean, your family, your wealth. And the only thing that will remain with you at the grave are your actions. So let's take a second and look at your family following you. When your family follow you to the grave, and they place you in the grave, they might even help and get down in there with you to place that loved one in the lahad. in that side junction, because if you look at the grave of the Muslims, as it should be, it's dug a hole that is straight down and then off to the side, like an L, right? And then they're supposed to put you in that side, then they cover that up. So actually, if you were to look down in the grave, they shouldn't even see you because you've been placed in that side. I hope y'all understand. I know I don't have any visuals, but I hope you follow me, right? Because I know sometimes they don't do that way here. Allahu musta'an. Another reason why the Muslims need their own place for that graveyard. But al-muhim, once they place you in there, is your uncle going to stay in that grave with you? Is your cousin going to stay in that grave with you? Is your husband going to stay? They don't. They got to get out. And they might even stay for a little bit, cry for a little bit, reminisce for a little bit. But then after that, what do they got to do? They got to keep on living. They got to go back. That mother, she still got kids. She got to look after those kids. Husband's not here no more. Son, his dad passed away. Son got to keep moving on. He's got his own family now. He got to keep moving forward. He can't stay at the graveyard forever. He can't set up shop, set up a tent, and live there. He got to move on with life. And same with any other family member. They got to move on. So no matter how attached you were to them and how attached you were to they were to you, doesn't matter. They got to go back. And the same with the wealth. You can't take it with you. And it sounds ironic. Why does that even need to be mentioned? Why is that always talked about in Islam? In the Quran or the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, that your wealth doesn't follow you, doesn't go with you. Because it's the opposite of what people talk about today. Today, people talk about generational wealth. Today, people talk about leaving a legacy. I gotta build this for my kids. I gotta build this not only for me, but for them too. That's all that is. But just know, no matter what you build, no matter what you save, no matter how much you collect, you cannot take it with you. And many people don't understand that. You'll see in ancient China, when they dig up, and sometimes they'll find an emperor, and he's got all kinds of slaves and servants and concubines that have been buried with him. Or if you look at the pharaohs of old, they have a whole system where they take out the body parts and the organs to preserve it, right? Why? Because he's got to get it ready for the next life. And his concubines and his servants and his gold and his treasures, because what? They think they can do what? Take it with them. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells you, no, that's not how it works. وَمَا الْحَيَاةُ الدُّنْيَا إِلَّا مَتَاعُ الْغُرُورِ. It is a temporary enjoyment. You're not taking that with you. So then the proper perspective that the Prophet ﷺ gives us, said the only thing that's going to stay with you is whatever you did in this life. What does that mean if your actions are going to stay with you? And actually elsewhere, the Prophet ﷺ, he clarifies even further that not figuratively, but actually literally, when you are in your grave, when I am in my grave, the Prophet ﷺ teaches us that your actions, your prayer, your recitation of Quran, etc., they will come in the form of a man. Handsome, beautiful man. Smelling good, it will come. After Munkar and Nakir have asked you the three questions that you all know, Man Rabbuk, Ma Dinuk, Wa Man Nabiyuk. After those questions are asked, and this person is going to come, assuming that you successfully answered those questions, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us all to answer them. Allahumma ameen. He will come and you will look at them and you say, who are you? You come with a seemingly pleasant face, good fragrant smell. Who are you? He says, I'm your good deeds. And I'm here to stay with you. I'm here to stay with you until the judgment starts. And of course, now that you're in that grave, the Prophet ﷺ says what? That you will be given furnishings from paradise, just to give you a taste, a preamble of the real thing that's to come. You'll be having a window showing your address in paradise, exactly where you're going to be. And conversely, you will also be given a window to the hellfire of where you would have been. Just like it does in the ayah, where Allah tells you, if you're safe from this and entered this, and if you're safe from the fire and entered into paradise, here you get to see where you are in paradise, and you say, whew, alhamdulillah. I would have been in there, That's where I would have been. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. Alhamdulillah, I don't have to go there. And it makes you even more elated, even more happy. And it makes you even feel even more that you're genuinely, truly are what? That you are really successful. But you will have company with who? With your deeds. And on the opposite ends. The deeds that you commit. If you stole, if you lied, if you oppressed, if you hurt, if you cheated, if you did what you know you weren't supposed to. If you prioritize the dunya over Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you prioritize the dunya over faith. If you prioritize the dunya over your purpose in life, then an ugly, filthy person will come to you. And you will say, who are you? This is the worst type of person to come to me. Who are you? You say, I'm your deeds. Your bad deeds that you used to do in the dunya. And I'm here to keep you company. And that person will be given furnishings from the hellfire. Clothing from the hellfire. And a window showing their address, their exact location, where they are going to be in the hellfire. Wa'iyadu billah. May Allah protect us from that. Allahumma ameen. And then they will be shown a window into paradise of where they could have been. Again, to even further emphasize the loss and the regret on what you have missed out. That's the purpose of that, for you to be able to see where you could have been in paradise. And so this is the company that that person will have. And you have to ask yourself, brothers and sisters, and why I came for Jumu'ah today, is who do you want to be in your company? Who do you want to be sitting with you, waiting in the grave until the day of judgment starts? أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين من كل ذنب فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. I say what I say first and foremost for myself and then for all of you. And I beg Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's forgiveness. And I exhort and I remind all of you to do the same. Indeed, He is the oft forgiving and He is especially merciful. الحمد لله وحده وكفاه وصلى الله وسلم على نبينا محمد عليه أفضل الصلاة وتم التسليم ثم أما بعد. My beloved brothers and sisters in Islam, firstly, the brothers, if you could please scoot up and make room for those who are still coming in. Brothers, if you could please scoot up, inshallah, especially starting with the first row, y'all can scoot up, and then the brothers behind them as well. Barakallahu feekum. There are numerous lessons that we can take from this hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. Number one, the inevitability of death. And that it's something that you should remember often, so that it can give you an aid, or be an aid in you having perspective. And when we say perspective, what is priority? What is important in this life? Every single one of us must do this. The inevitability of death, the importance of remembering it often, and not only this, but then even specifically what should be priority. And from those priorities is faith. And another one that I want to add even is family. Now, the point about faith should be obvious. Because when the Prophet ﷺ says the thing that will follow you are your deeds, and what you want to be in company with you in the grave are your good deeds. I.e., I prioritize Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in my life. I believed in Him, and I believed in His oneness, and I loved Him more than anything else, and I was afraid of Him more than anything else, and I had hope in Him more than anything else, and because of my love, my hope, and my fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that influenced my psychology, that influenced my values, that influenced my behavior. And if it influences my behavior, i.e. it influences how I act. It influences then my what? My deeds. It influences my deeds. What I do. This is why the Prophet ﷺ says elsewhere, إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يَنْظُرُ إِلَى صُوَرِكُمْ وَلَا أَجْسَامِكُمْ وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ يَنْظُرُ إِلَى قُلُوبِكُمْ وَأَعْمَالِكُمْ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not look at your shapes, your sizes, and your forms. He doesn't care about your color or the texture of your hair. We care about that stuff. We prioritize that. We make it important. But it's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who made you your complexion, the tongue that you have, i.e. the language that you speak. That's Allah's doing. How big you are, how tall you are, your genetics, that's all Allah's doing. So he's not going to judge you on something that he did. But what he does look at though, qulubikum, that's that belief in Allah, that's prioritizing Allah, that's your aqidah, that's you remembering death, that's you thinking about the hereafter, and that's more important than anything else. And then what follows that? Well, your deeds. This is what Allah is going to bring for you on the Qiyamah. And even before that, like we said, when you go to your grave. So that's number one, is you prioritizing your faith, i.e. prioritizing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that should play out in your work. So when you have the opportunity to give more time and more effort and more blood, sweat, and tears to your work, but you've already given enough and you have enough, don't sacrifice even more for that, for the work. Prioritize for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you have extra time, if you have extra money, if you have extra, give it to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Don't break your back knowing that woman hayati dunya illa mata'ul ghurur. That doesn't, and that, please don't get me mistaken. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَا تَنْسَ نَصِيبَكُم مِّنَ الدُّنْيَا. Don't forget your share and your portion of this world. But be indifferent to it. It should not be your number one top priority. And even when you do think about your work, even when you think about your career and your occupation, it should be under my worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Job interview. I just need to let y'all know, thank you for the opportunity to work with you all in your company. I see you're doing wonderful things, but I need you to know, I'm a Muslim. Friday, I gotta go. Friday, I gotta go to Jummah. That's it. Many people, they don't think about that. They prioritize what in that job interview? The money, the position, the status, or whatever. And then the company tells them, we need you to be here Friday all day. And they say, Sami'na wa ata'na. So tell you, practically, no matter what you say with your tongue, practically in that example, what is that person prioritizing except his work? Same thing when you're choosing a husband or a wife. Again, the Prophet ﷺ, he mentions there are many different reasons why people get married, but the priority should be what? That to be deen. You're supposed to marry the one that has the deen. Don't think, okay, of course you want somebody who is pleasing when you look at them, that you're compatible ilahity, but he said, get the one that's got the deen. But if you don't do that, how many marriages struggle? Because they didn't prioritize that. Not before they got married, not when they got married, and even afterwards when they're married. So many marriages struggle. Why? Because instead of putting Allah at the center of their marriage or the center of their relationship with their kids, it's themselves, or it's the spouse, or it's the other party. What makes them happy, instead of prioritizing what? Allah's contact. And they end up in the long run regretting. So number one is faith. Then number two, and this is the last thing, and I said about family. And in particular, I mean your kids. And why do I say your kids? Because that's not mentioned in the hadith. But there is a hadith elsewhere where the Prophet ﷺ, he mentions that there are certain things that will benefit you after your death. There are certain things that will benefit you after your death. And I'm sure you've all been at a fundraiser where they'll tell you Sadaqah Jariyah. Of course, we know that one. But the other one is a righteous child who makes dua for you. And how are you, and I want you to think about this as an investment. When I say a righteous child that makes dua for you, they will benefit you even when you're gone. How are you going to have that? How are you going to have a righteous child if you don't prioritize your iman and your faith? And your children don't see that from you. And they don't see you reading Quran. You drop them off every Saturday and Sunday, but you don't ever pick up the book yourself. You see them going to little weekend madrasa, etc., but you don't ever go to a halaqah yourself. But then you want them to be righteous, obedient, subservient, mashallah, tabarakallah, they look after you. But you should be thinking about when I invest in my kids, when I spend time with them, when I'm showing them a practical example of being a good, righteous Muslim, that's going to take time and effort on your part. That means you have to what? In your own life, you have to prioritize the deen. More than your work, more than other things. Your presence in their life is more important than you providing them with nice things. And so when you do that, you are making an investment so that when you die, they may drop for you. So how many priorities we said? 2. Obviously there are more, but we said 2. Faith and family. And in doing so, that will be an investment that will come to you, back to you, with exponential return. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala facilitate it and easy for all of us. Oh Allah, we ask you by your most excellent names and your most beautiful attributes to send your peace and blessings upon the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, upon his pure family, his good companions, and any and all of those who follow them in righteousness until the last day. Oh Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب. اللهم أرنا الحق حقا وارزقنا اتباعه. اللهم أرنا الباطل باطلا وارزقنا اجتنابه. Oh Allah, we ask you by your most beautiful names and excellent attributes that you support and aid all of those who are fighting in the cause of La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah, and that your word and your deen be raised in the land over all else, Ya Rabbil Alameen. Oh Allah, we ask you to heal and to cure any of those who have been wounded in your cause, Ya Rabbil Alameen, and to heal those who are sick. Oh Allah, we ask you to alleviate the debt of any of those who may be in debt, any of those who are in the Muslims, amongst the Muslims, and those who are here in this masjid now. Oh Allah, we ask you to alleviate any debt that they may have, and to heal and cure any sickness that they may be suffering and going through. Oh Allah, we ask you to unite the hearts of the Muslims upon the Book of Allah and the Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Ya Rabbil Alameen, innahu waliyyu dhalik wa qadirun alayhi wa akhir dawan, alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen.
الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله.
استوى اعتدلوا